So what does it really take? What does it take to look at a sheer mountain wall or a desolate high-altitude desert and decide, yep, a train is going right through there? It takes this kind of crazy, defiant ambition, a belief that we can just carve a path right through whatever nature decides to throw at us.
All right, so let's get right into it. We're going to be looking at some of the world's most extreme railways. And these are way more than just a way to get from point A to point B. They're staggering monuments to engineering, to sheer guts, and a whole lot of sacrifice. They're basically steel lifelines built to conquer the unconquerable.
So first up, we've got to talk about the sheer audacity of building against nature itself. I mean, the challenge was huge. How on earth do you lay a perfectly level track when you're dealing with a landscape that is anything but level? Okay, so picture this. You're in the Swiss Alps at the turn of the 20th century. All around you are these towering, jagged peaks, super deep gorges, and you've got the constant threat of avalanches and rockfalls. This was the wild, brutal canvas they had to work with for the Bernina Express. And the big problem wasn't just getting through the mountains, it was getting up them.
And the solution they came up with? It was absolutely brilliant. Instead of trying to go around the mountain, they just went inside it. So the train enters a tunnel, spirals a full 360 degrees upward while it's still inside the rock, and then it pops out way higher up the valley. It's just an incredibly clever way to gain altitude in a space where it should be impossible.
Now let's jump over to a totally different but just as hostile place. We're in northern Argentina now, in one of the driest deserts on the entire planet. This is where they built the Tren a las Nubes, which means train to the clouds. And here, the challenge wasn't just wide-open plains, but these dizzying canyons and some truly fearsome heights.
And when I say heights, I am not kidding. This railway climbs to over 4,200 meters. That is nearly 14,000 feet above sea level. At that altitude, the oxygen gets thin. Just breathing is a challenge. So yeah, Train to the Clouds isn't just a poetic name. It is literally a railway in the clouds.
But, you know, this kind of progress, this idea of conquering nature, it always comes with a price. And that price wasn't paid by the engineers sitting in their offices. It was paid by the thousands and thousands of workers who physically built these lines, a lot of the time with just their bare hands.
I mean, that quote, it just reveals such a chilling and brutal mindset. Back then, you didn't have safety regulations, no unions looking out for you. So if you were an exhausted worker, you didn't hear a train coming and you got run over, well, that was just considered your own fault. Unbelievable.
And the dangers were just everywhere. You had toxic gases from tunnel explosions, rocks falling from above, and this dreaded thing in the Andes called the viento blanco, this white, icy wind that could literally make you wander off the path and freeze to death. It was just a constant battle for survival.
And the toll was just staggering. For the Tren a las Nubes alone, during its 27-year construction, it's estimated that more than 600 men lost their lives. 600. That is an incredible, heavy sacrifice for just one single line of track.
So after all that, what happened to these iron lifelines? You know, so many of them were built with these huge promises of connecting people and bringing prosperity. But what's their legacy today, decades, sometimes a century later?
Well, let's take the Tazara Railway in Africa. It was built with help from China back in the 70s, and it was called the Freedom Train. It was this huge symbol of independence for Tanzania and Zambia. A really big deal. But today, the reality is kind of harsh. We're talking 8-hour delays, people stealing cables, engines that are constantly broken down. That grand dream is really struggling to survive.
And that decline has a very real, very human impact. This quote is from a woman named Concepcion Sosa. Her entire livelihood in her remote little village depended on the tourists the Tren a las Nubes brought. So for her, when that train service just became unreliable and spotty, her whole world basically ground to a halt.
But that's not the whole story. For some incredibly isolated communities, these old railways are still quite literally a lifeline. Like up in the Swiss Alps, there's this innkeeper at a remote station. In the winter, his own spring freezes over and gets buried in snow. The only way he gets drinking water is from the train. Without it, he'd just have to close up shop.
So these monumental railways, they managed to survive their impossible construction, they've survived decades of use, but now they face a completely new set of threats. We're talking about a rapidly changing climate, and a world that maybe doesn't need them in the same way anymore. Just look at this.
When the Bernina line was first built, the massive Motorrats Glacier was right there. It practically touched the tracks. It was this huge defining feature of the landscape, a literal river of ice right next to the train.
And the change today is just stark. In just the last 20 years, that same glacier has pulled back so far that its edge is now about 20 kilometers away from the tracks it used to touch. It's a staggering, very visible scar of climate change, unfolding right there in real time. And this local farmer, I think he captures the feeling on the ground perfectly. For the people who live and work in the Alps, this isn't some abstract idea anymore. The change is real, it's scary, and it signals this deeply uncertain future for their entire way of life.
So to survive, these railways are having to adapt. They're finding a new purpose. That line that was built to haul copper out of the Andes, it's now the world-famous train to the clouds for tourists. The one that was built for freight in the Alps, it's now a UNESCO World Heritage Journey. Their whole reason for being has shifted from industry to experience.
Which kind of leaves us with this one big thought. These railways were forged by a totally different world, a world of, boundless ambition, cheap labor, and a climate that seemed stable. And as that world fades away, what do these monuments mean to us now? Are they just relics of a bygone era? Or are they timeless testaments to that human drive to do the impossible?